Dawn, thick fog hung over the Gulf of Tonkin like a milky white curtain. Hai Phong was still sunk in early sleep, only the sound of waves gently lapping against the wharf and the distant whistle of container ships. On the city's highest hill, the air defense radar crew suddenly saw the screen flashing red violently. 7 large bright dots, flying low, speed 300 knots, heading straight from the northeast. No identification code, no answer to communication. The signal was clearly large drones, each carrying at least 4 500-pound guided bombs. Red alert immediately howled across the air defense air force in the northern region. Long sirens, red lights flashing continuously in the underground command bunker. Less than 30 seconds later, S-300 and Spider missile crews in Haiphong and Quang Ninh simultaneously rotated barrels. Radar screens locked tight on 7 targets. In the war room, the commanding officer slammed his hand on the table. Fire at will. The dry sound fire rang out on all frequencies. More than 20 air defense missiles left launchers simultaneously, drawing long white smoke trails screaming into the blue sky. The Gulf of Tonkin sky was suddenly torn apart by fire and smoke. The first 4 drones exploded in mid-air into 4 glowing red fireballs, debris falling into the sea like iron rain. Explosions echoed to the mainland, Haiphong windows shaking violently. The remaining 3 immediately circled to avoid, diving to less than 100 meters. Guided bombs started leaving bays. The first black smoke column rose vertically from Dinvu Industrial Zone. Secondary explosions rang out continuously as bombs hit the ground. Haiphong was no longer peaceful. It had become a battlefield. 7:15 a.m., Haiphong's sky was ablaze. 4 red burning spheres hung over the Gulf of Tonkin, then fell slowly into the water, dragging long black smoke trails. The remaining 3 split up. 1 rushed straight for the thermal power plant, 2 circled south, aiming for Dinvu port area. At S-300 and Spider batteries, gunner crews didn't wait for a second order. Missiles continued leaving pads. 12 more screamed into the sky simultaneously. 1 drone was hit by 3 missiles in a row, exploding into thousands of red-hot iron fragments, falling onto Loctre residential area. A carbon propeller fragment cut a high-voltage power line. Electric pole snapped in 2, sparks spraying like fireworks. The second one tried to dive lower, flying close to the sea surface, just 10 meters from the waves. The first guided bomb fell on Dinvu Industrial Zone, hitting the oil depot. Black-red fire column rose vertically higher than 250 meters. Shockwave wiped out a series of factories, tin roofs flying hundreds of meters away. Secondary explosions rang out continuously as gas tanks exploded, turning the whole industrial zone into a glowing red sea of fire. At the same time, at Kien, an airport, 4 Su-30 Mk2S were ready on the runway. Pilots rushed into cockpits, AL-31 Farad's engines roaring to start. Hangar doors burst open. 4 jets surged into the sky in less than a minute, dragging long white smoke trails behind. Aircraft radar locked tight on the 2 remaining targets. From 5,000 meters altitude, R-77 missiles left launch tubes. 2 red fire streaks rushed down like meteors. The 5th drone was hit right in the fuselage, exploding into a fireball in the middle of the bay. The 6th tried to dodge, flying close to the water surface, but the second missile caught up, exploding just 5 meters away from it. Shockwave threw it into the sea. Propellers snapped off, fuselage sinking in red oil slick. Only the 7th left, the largest, carrying the heaviest bombs, rushing straight at Haiphong thermal power plant at maximum speed. 7:28 a.m., Haiphong thermal power plant appeared clear in the sights of the final drone. It flew low, close to the ground. Just less than 300 meters from the plant roof, guided bombs had left the bay, rushing straight down to the main turbine unit. At the man-pad's position near Rao Bridge, a young air defense sergeant knelt on one knee, Igla S tube on his shoulder, eyes glued to the sight, finger pulling the trigger without hesitation. The small missile left the tube, drawing a thin white smoke line rushing into the sky. 3 seconds later, the Igla hit the tail engine precisely. The drone exploded into a glowing red fireball right above the thermal power plant. Shockwaves swept away tin roofs, glass shattered, but the turbine unit remained intact. Red burning debris fell like fire, rain. A large propeller piece stabbed into the plant yard just 15 meters from the turbine unit. At the same time, 4 Su-30 Mk2S circled back over the Gulf of Tonkin, radar sweeping the sky clean. No targets left. The lead pilot reported briefly. 7 out of 7 down. Sky clear. On the ground, fire sirens howled all over Hai Phong. Ambulances rushed into Dinvu Industrial Zone amidst the sea of fire. Firefighters sprayed white foam onto burning fuel tanks. Black smoke rose vertically, covering the entire port city, so high that civilian aircraft had to detour 50 kilometers away. The sky returned to silence. Only 7 black smoke columns from 7 drone wrecks rose between the bay and the mainland. Hai Phong just survived 7 minutes of hell. 8 o'clock. Hai Phong was submerged in thick black smoke. Dinvu Industrial Zone turned into a glowing red sea of fire. Sporadic secondary explosions still rang out from burning chemical drums. Debris of 4 drones lay scattered on Lathan Tong Street. Broken carbon propellers stuck deep into the road surface. Charred aircraft tails fell in the middle of the intersection. At the Northern Region Air Defense Air Force Command, the satellite screen showed clearly. Exactly 100 nautical miles northeast of the shore, a new type of Chinese command ship stood still, signal receiving antenna rotating continuously. All data from the 7 drones transmitted there before being shot down. The intelligence officer slammed his hand on the table. They intentionally set a trap, wanting us to react strongly to have an excuse. The service commander nodded coldly, then give them an exact excuse. 8:15. At Lac Huyen Military Port, 4 Vietnamese Project 12418, missile boats went full speed leaving the wharf. Diesel engines roared. Ship bows cut white waves, rushing out to the Gulf of Tonkin at a speed of 40 knots. On deck, KH-35 Uran missiles were loaded and ready. Fire control radar locked tight on the target 100 nautical miles away. On the Chinese command ship, the radar crew suddenly saw 4 large bright dots rushing in at terrifying speed. Red alert howled. The ship tried to turn back to retreat, but it was too late. 8:40, 16 kh, 35 seconds left, launch tubes from 4 Vietnamese ships. Glowing red fire streaks drew straight lines on the sea surface, flying close to the waves just 3 meters from the water. The Chinese command ship exploded into a giant fireball in the middle of the Gulf of Tonkin. Black smoke column rose vertically higher than 500 meters, red oil spreading for kilometers. Not a single distress signal was sent in time. Hai Phong answered the trap with fire. 9 a.m. The Gulf of Tonkin sea surface glowed red from the fire column of the Chinese command ship just wiped out. Thick steel hull fragments flew hundreds of meters, falling like iron, rain. Red oil slick spread fast into a giant circle wider than 10 nautical miles. 4 Vietnamese missile boats did not slow down, continuing to rush to the explosion site. On deck, sailors stood at attention. 30mm machine guns pointed in 4 directions. Upon arrival, only red burning debris remained floating, and a few Chinese sailors clinging to life buoys, faces charred black, eyes wide with terror. The lead ship commander ordered briefly, "No captives." Machine guns fired simultaneously. Explosions crackled on the water surface. Those clinging to buoys were wiped out in the blink of an eye. Red blood mixed with black oil, not a single survivor. At the same time, from Noi Bai Airport, 2 more Su-30 Mk2S took off urgently, carrying KH-31 anti-ship missiles. They flew low, close to the sea, radar scanning the entire northeastern water area. No targets left. Only the burning oil ring and 7 black smoke columns from 7 drone wrecks on land. 9:30. The order return was issued from the Naval Command. 4 missile boats turned around, diesel engines growling softly, cutting waves, returning to Lac Huyen Naval Port. On deck, sailors still stood at attention, eyes looking northeast, where the last smoke column was still rising from the command ship wreck. Hai Phong answered the trap with fire and blood. The Gulf of Tonkin returned to silence. but the scent of death still hung between sky and sea. 10 o'clock, Hai Phong began to extinguish the fire. Fire trucks lined up from Rao Bridge to Din Vu, hoses sprayed white foam onto burning fuel tanks. Black smoke still rose vertically, but no more secondary explosions. Self-defense, militia, and engineering troops ran amidst the rubble, pulling injured people out of collapsed workshops, blood staining the hot concrete floor red. On Dusan Beach, 7 drone carcasses lay scattered like dead beasts. Carbon propellers broken, fuselages charred black, unreleased bombs still hanging dangling under the belly. Combat engineers cut wires, removed warheads, sweat mixed with blood running down faces. At the Military Region 3 Command, the satellite screen showed clearly. The entire northeastern sea area was clear of Chinese warships. Not a single one dared to approach within 150 nautical miles. Only the burning oil ring from the command ship and 7 black smoke columns on land, like 7 giant incense sticks. 11 o'clock, the Prime Minister appeared live on national television. Voice concise, cold as ice. We were provoked. We responded. Whoever touches Hai Phong will receive fire. At the same time, the red flag with yellow star was raised again on the city's highest air defense radar station. Sea wind blew hard, the flag flapping amidst the undissipated black smoke. At the foot of the hill, soldiers and militia stood at attention, eyes red looking at the flag. Not a shout, only the sound of hearts beating fast. Hai Phong was still burning, but no one dared to come near anymore. Late afternoon, the blood-red sun set slowly behind the Tamdao Mountains. Hai Phong had extinguished the last fire in Din Vu. Only thin, twisting smoke columns rising from the rubble, acrid smell, still hung over the port city. At Dusan Beach, 7 drone carcasses were lined up neatly on white sand. Combat engineers used large cranes to pull each one onto flatbed trucks, chains creaking, charred black carbon shell fragments falling scattered onto the sand. Civilians stood in long lines by the road. Not a cry, only bowing heads silently when the trucks passed. 18 hours. All remaining debris and warheads were moved to the Cat Ba military quarantine area. Special forces established a 3-layer security ring. Service dogs barked loudly, smelling remaining explosives. Ordnance experts cut open the black box compartment of each one. All data had been wiped clean, only a line of text laser engraved deep on the alloy shell. Test completed. Phase 1. In the Naval Command secret meeting room, the intelligence officer placed a new set of satellite photos on the table. From an underground base on Hainan Island, 12 more signals of larger drones were being pulled out of the tunnel. Expected takeoff in the next 48 hours. Naval Commander slammed his hand on the table, voice deep like thunder. Their Phase 1 ended with fire, Phase 2 will end with the sea. Offshore, 4 Project 12418 missile boats left Lock Haiyan military port again, this time carrying the new version, KH-35 missiles, and Bastion coastal anti-ship missiles had been towed to Dusan since afternoon. On the command bridge, sailors stood at attention, eyes looking straight northeast, where the sun had just set red. Hai Phong was ready for Phase 2. 8 p.m., Hai Phong turned off all civilian lights. Only white floodlights from air defense missile batteries remained, and red lights flashing on the roof of the thermal power plant that just escaped. In the pitch-black sky, 4 Su-30 Mk2S patrolled continuously at 10,000 meters altitude, radar sweeping the northeastern airspace clean. At Cat Ba, inside the underground command bunker, the satellite screen showed clearly 12 larger drones, fixed-wing, carrying anti-ship cruise missiles, being pulled out of a tunnel in Hainan. Estimated takeoff time, 3 a.m. tomorrow. The Air Defense Air Force Service Commander nodded coldly. Don't wait for them to arrive. Preemptive strike. 9 o'clock. At Qianan and Noibai airports, 16 Su-30 Mk2S and Su-27 started up simultaneously. KAB-500 guided bombs and KH-29, KH-31 missiles hung fully under the belly. Pilots put on helmets, pulled down visors, thumbs ready on the launch button. 10 o'clock, the order takeoff was issued. 16 aircraft surged into the night sky like a flock of iron birds, dragging long, glowing red jet fire trails behind. They flew low close to the sea surface, lights off, radar off, using only inertial navigation systems and internal satellites. 11 o'clock, the formation split in two, 8 heading straight for Hainan, 8 flying a large loop east to cut off retreat. Not a single radio signal was emitted. Only the sound of AL-31 engines roaring under the pitch-black sea surface. Hai Phong waited in silence, and this time, fire would fly from Vietnamese soil to the land of the provoker. 2 a.m., 16 Vietnamese Sioux, 30 seconds and Sioux 27 seconds, quietly crossed the 19th parallel, flying close to the sea surface, less than 50 meters from the waves. Lights off, radar off. Only faint red jet exhaust glow under the aircraft belly. At the Hainan underground base, white floodlights lit up the tunnel brightly. 12 large drones had been pulled out onto the underground concrete runway, wings longer than 20 meters, each carrying 4 2-ton YJ-12 anti-ship missiles. The Chinese technical crew was installing final equipment, not yet starting engines. 2:15 a.m., the lead formation of 8 Su-32s appeared above the tunnel like ghosts. No warning, no evasion. 16 KAB-1500 laser-guided bombs fell simultaneously. A terrifying explosion shook the entire Hainan Island. The 3-meter-thick concrete tunnel roof was pierced. 12 drones exploded in a chain reaction inside the tunnel. Fire columns sprayed back up to the sky, higher than 400 meters, accompanied by thousands of YJ-12 missile fragments flying out like iron rain. The entire tunnel collapsed completely, burying hundreds of technicians and 12 killers that hadn't taken off yet. The remaining 8-ship formation circled east, releasing KH-31P anti-radar missiles. 16 missiles rushed down onto Hainan air defense positions, wiping out all early warning radars and remaining HQ-9 systems. Black smoke rose vertically, covering the entire southern island sky. 2:30 a.m., the Vietnamese formation turned back, flying low home. Not a single one was shot down. Not a single radio signal emitted throughout the journey. 3 a.m., Hai Phong shone brightly with floodlights welcoming Su-32's landing at Qianan. Pilots stepped out of cockpits, faces black with smoke, eyes red. No cheering, no smiling. Only a cold nod between brothers. Phase 2 ended before it began. Hainan was silent. Hai Phong still stood. 4 a.m., all of Vietnam woke up in silence. Live television from the Ministry of National Defense broadcast only a short black and white film clip. Hainan tunnel collapsing, fire column rising vertically, then the screen switched to the red flag with yellow star flying against the night sky of the Gulf of Tonkin. No commentary, no background music. Only white text appeared in the middle of the screen. Phase 1 of the enemy has ended. Our Phase 2 as well. In Beijing, the emergency meeting room in the Zhongnanhai High basement was lit all night. Satellite imagery showed the Hainan tunnel was just a deep pit full of fire. $12 billion drones, along with the entire elite technical team, were buried in less than 3 minutes. 6 a.m., the entire sea area south of Hainan was blockaded by the Chinese Navy, but not a single ship dared to cross the 18th parallel. Not a single aircraft dared to take off. Only black smoke columns rising lazily from the island like 7 giant incense sticks. In Hai Phong, people started coming out to the streets. New flags, new trumpets, new banners, just quietly placing flowers and white candles at the feet of the 7 drone, carcasses still lying on Doosan Beach. Sea wind blew hard, candles burned red, white flowers flapped. 8 a.m. The Naval Command issued a short announcement. The northeastern sea area is clear of the enemy. Hai Phong is intact. Vietnam still stands. In the sky, the last 4 Su-30 Mk2S flew a victory lap over the Gulf of Tonkin, dragging 4 endless red and yellow smoke trails behind. On the ground, the entire port city stood still, eyes looking up at the sky. Not a shout. Hai Phong had survived and had answered the trap with fire 100 times over. 10 a.m., harsh sunlight, shone straight down on Dusun Beach. 7 drone carcasses were pulled onto flatbed trucks, covered with red flags with yellow stars, preparing to be taken to Cat Bai military display area. Civilians stood in long lines on both sides of the road, no flowers, no slogans, just quietly placing hands on chests as the convoy passed. In Hanoi, the National Assembly held an emergency extraordinary session. The Prime Minister stood before the hall, voice deep but resonating across the country via loudspeakers, "We do not want war. But when war is brought to our doorstep, we will burn down the door of the one who brings it." At the same time, at sea, the Vietnamese missile boat fleet returned to Loc Huyen military port. Sailors lined up on deck, helmets in hand, eyes looking straight northeast. When ships docked, no trumpets, no drums, only the sound of tide lapping gently and the red flag with yellow star flapping on the command tower roof. 12 p.m., the whole nation was silent for 1 minute. From Saya Mao Cape to Mong Kai Frontier, from cities to villages, everyone stopped all work, stood at attention, eyes facing the sea. 1 minute for Hai Phong. 1 minute for those who fell during the 7 minutes of fire this morning. 1 minute to remind that Vietnam never bows down. 1 minute passed. Ship horns in Hai Phong rang out again, this time signaling peace. Life continues. But from now on, whenever the northeast wind blows, Hai Phong people will smell the smoke and fire of today. Late afternoon, the blood-red sun set slowly behind the Gulf of Tonkin. Hai Phong was clear of smoke, only thin ash trails drifting in the city sky, and the acrid smell wafting in the sea breeze. At Dusun Beach, 7 drone carcasses were lined up for the last time before being moved to the museum. Combat engineers used large cranes to pull each one onto the display platform, chains creaking, charred shell fragments falling onto white sand. Civilians stood in a large circle around, not a word spoken. Only the sound of steady waves and the red flag with yellow star flapping on the highest pole. On the city's highest air defense command post, the flag was raised for the last time of the day. Sea wind blew hard, flag flying taut, glowing red under the sunset. At the foot of the hill, soldiers and militia stood at attention in long lines, eyes red looking at the flag, hands saluting military style. Not a shout, only the sound of hearts beating in unison. 8 p.m., the entire city turned off lights for 1 hour. Only white floodlights from missile batteries remained, and flickering white candlelights on Dusun Beach. Tens of thousands of candles were released onto the sea, drifting slowly northeast, where the burning oil ring from the Chinese command ship had long extinguished. Sea wind blew hard, carrying the smell of salt and the fading smell of smoke. Hai Phong slept, but no one dreamed of peace like before anymore. 7 minutes of hell had passed. Vietnam had answered with 70 minutes of fire. And from now on, whenever dawn rises over the Gulf of Tonkin, Hai Phong people all look northeast, where the sun rises, and whisper a single sentence, "We still stand."